We've got Mr. Agarwal with us, so I think we can now take it on. Thanks.
Sure, sir. A very good afternoon to everyone who has joined us today. I am Jasleen Kaur Lava, Assistant Vice President of the Startup India team at Invest India, the national investment promotion agency of our country. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you for the launch of the Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect. The goal of this closed-door mentorship series is to encourage cross-border knowledge exchange and prepare entrepreneurs for expansion to new markets. Indian startups that are keen to explore Sweden as a market will be mentored by experts from Sweden. This collaboration between India and Sweden to support startups highlights the mutual commitment of both countries to drive prosperity through cross-border innovation. Today with us, for this launch, I would like to welcome Ms. Anita Shukla, Chargé d'Affaires for the Embassy of India in Sweden, Shri Anil Agarwal, Joint Secretary DPIIT, and Mr. Deepak Bagla, MD and CEO of Invest India. Thank you all for taking time and launching this program, which will be pivotal in helping startups from both countries to access global market. I would now like to invite Mr. Deepak Bagla, MD and CEO of Invest India, to introduce us to the strengthening dynamic of the India-Sweden bilateral relationships. Sir, please.
Thank you, Jane. Truly a pleasure, and I must say it is truly a very important day to us. I remember 2018 when the Prime Minister was there and we were all accompanying him. And this was one of the strong pillars on which this relationship gets further strengthened. So, Madam Excellency, so good to see you with us and all your support. Mr. Agarwal obviously is spearheading this entire effort, but I would like to welcome Mr. Krishnamurthy from Truecaller, Mr. Pankaj Tagra from HCL Technologies, Kamal Bali from Volvo, and Kamal has been a very strong pillar of further strengthening this relationship. Mr. Mahesh Kumar from CEO Result and Magnus Anderson, Country Business Development Manager there. And I'll tell you why I say this, because this is a relationship which is built on very strong three pillars: people to people, business to business, government to government. And I recollect when the Prime Minister was there, one of the most important things we were looking at was this partnership in developing as the new world order comes into place, with innovation and startups taking shape on how to further strengthen it. And ever since 2018, when we declared the India-Sweden Innovation Partnership with the Honorable Prime Minister, I think this has strengthened tremendously. It is one of those relationships where all the three pillars are strengthening it further: people to people, business to business, and government to government. And the very interesting point on that is today, if I look at it from an Invest India perspective clearly, we have 46 business requests which are currently being worked on. And these are business requests from Swedish companies coming into India. And you know what's more interesting? It's not just the number, but it's also the span of these requests which they cover across 20 sectors. This relationship is strengthening very fast and is going to be one of the strongest pillars as we go ahead. The immense market opportunity in India, the partnership, the ability of companies to work together. I mean, in fact, think of it. These are relationships which are over 100 years old. We've had some very interesting names in India, starting with Ericsson and many of the others, which have been here for over 100 years. And I was just going through some of the list. We have Sandvik, which has been over 50 years. And we had Ericsson, which came in 1903. We have a number of these relationships which are there to strengthen this entire corridor. And from there is what we are seeing the result. So I mentioned to you, we are currently, Invest India is working on 46 business requests from Sweden into India. And the more interesting thing is they're across 20 sectors. Sectors spanning across auto ancillary, industrial machinery, mechanical engineering, electrical equipment, metallurgy. And the reason why I'm listing these out is to show you how this relationship is getting more and more foundation strength as we go forward. I recollect 3 or 4 years ago when we were there in Sweden with the Prime Minister, this list was just about 11 or 12 sectors. Today I'm mentioning to you 20, so I spoke to you about metallurgy and defense. textiles, which is a new one which we are seeing coming up, consumer goods, metals and mining, waste management, and retail and e-commerce. This is very interesting. This is a new sector which has added up in the past 36 months. Healthcare, which is picking up tremendously, and water. We are seeing a lot of interest developing and a lot of synergies between the two countries where that is concerned. And I'm sure you're going to start seeing solutions which are not just for these two countries, but going forward, solutions for the entire world. Renewable energy, smart infrastructure, green technology, medical devices. This is a new one which has come up. And I've started seeing this in the past 24 months, which is catching a lot of attention and a lot of traction. Food processing, tourism, pharmaceuticals. The reason why I read these out to you is just to show you that how this entire relationship is now deepening its breadth. And now this relationship is becoming so much more special that when you will look at the numbers going forward of this relationship, both in terms of collaborations, I mean, currently, if I look at it, we have about 70 Indian companies in Sweden, a large number of them in pharmaceutical, IT. And similarly, as I mentioned to you, we have Swedish companies in India which are over 100 years old, which are across a number of sectors. But now, as this relationship is about to take forward, this is a relationship which is now going to have many more legs attached to it. And this is the strengthening for which we stand today. Mr. Agarwal is going to tell us a little more about what is going to be happening today, and especially on the startup side. He's the person who's been architecting a big architecture of this entire India-Sweden startup relationships. And I think that is going to be one of the biggest pillars as we go forward. In fact, just last month, we also launched the India-Sweden Healthcare Innovation Center. And I think health is again a very big sector where you are seeing this relationship gather further legs and becoming far more stronger. I personally see these number of sectors growing in number. I have a special dedicated team at Invest India to handhold each and every investment to further strengthen this corridor between Sweden and India. I think the potential is huge. The potential is immense. And what we are launching today is this further strengthening and understanding of this corridor, of these startups which are going to be working closely to understand more of the Swedish market and the ecosystem. And more interestingly, get solutions not just for our two countries, but synergize these ideas to get solutions for the entire globe. We will have more about the Indian startup market. Mr. Agarwal will tell us more about that. It is one of the most biggest movements which is coming out of India. So with that, I do welcome and congratulate this one more feather in this very strengthening relationship. And Madam Excellency, thank you very much for your leadership to take this forward, and everybody here present. So thank you again, and we look forward to further strengthening this very special bond between these two countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for elucidating the partnerships that both countries have built over the years and the role they can play in helping each other. I would now like to welcome Shri Anil Agarwal, Joint Secretary DPIIT, who will speak about the role this mentorship series will play in supporting some of the best startups of the country, which were selected through National Startup Awards and looking to expand in Sweden, and also welcome our dignitaries and set the context for the launch. Sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you very much, Jasleen, and a very, very good afternoon to everyone. My personal greetings to Mrs. Anita Shukla, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of India in Sweden, Mr. Deepak Bagla, MD and CEO Invest India, and the eminent panelists that we have today, Kari Krishnamurthy, Pankaj Tagra, Kamal Bali, Mahesh Kumar, and Magnus Anderson. You know, it is a privilege to be part of a bridge like this, which is being launched today. by the Embassy of Sweden and the Government of India and Invest India. We are aware startup ecosystem in India is gaining grounds over the last 4 years since our Prime Minister launched the Startup India initiative. We have consistently been making progress across the country. And today, we have a startup in each of the 28 states and 8 union territories. We are now almost adding startups by the hour. Every month, we have more than 720, that is a number, more than 720 to 1,000 startups getting recognized by DPIIT. 45% of them come from non-metro areas. And these startups are distributed across 75% of the districts that we have. We have about 730 districts in the country. The startups are now registered in more than 590 districts. Over the last 4 years, we have built capacities in all the states and union territories, the government officials, the government machineries. We have created systems which enable startups to nurture, with the result that today we have 30 states and UTs which have startup-centric specific policies. And these policies proactively support startups in our country. More than 39,000 startups are now recognized by us, and they are working across all dimensions of economy. There is not a single area of economy which is not touched by innovation and entrepreneurship in urban or rural India. Last year, we launched the first edition of the National Startup Awards. After all, we've seen a whole lot of awards by different sectors, by different houses. But we thought there was nothing like a National Startup Awards in India. And they were driven by the vision of our Prime Minister, who said, the success of startup is not in terms of the returns that it gives to its investors, but in terms of problems that it is solving for the society. It is about self-actualization. It is about a wider good. It is not just about making money. Well, you make money, you are doing business, you make money. But it is not just about making money. So our awards had a different marking criteria, a different evaluation criteria. And then, we divided the entire economy sectors into 12 different categories, starting from agriculture, education, energy, going right up to Industry 4.0, urban services, space, tourism, all these sectors. There were 35 different subcategories. We received more than 1,641 applications for these awards. We selected 36 of them. And 192 were finalists who were selected after a due diligence process to make pitches before the final jury. And the eligibility criteria for participation was that every startup must have a product in the market. So it is not an ideation stage startup. They are all companies which have been in business for 2 to 3 years who have a successful product in the market. It could be a hardware product. It could be also a software product. And then they must be doing business ethically, which means they should file audited financial statements for all years of their existence. And they should not have defaulted anywhere. Now, these are the conditions that we imposed while putting eligibility criteria for our National Startup Awards. And the result is outstanding. The kind of startups that we have selected after a robust evaluation process are some of the best innovations that one can find in the country. Not just innovation, they display the highest level of entrepreneurship. And you know, this program, when we received this proposal from the Sweden of the Embassy of India in Sweden, that they want to do a mentorship program for Indian startups, we thought nothing better than this. Nothing better than this. Sweden is a country known for its startup ecosystem, for the maturity of the innovation ecosystem in Sweden. We have so many, Deepak just told us, so many companies from Sweden are working in India for years together. They have seen this kind of innovation firsthand on their own. And when we started handholding, you know, we are not just declaring startups and then leaving on their own. What we have formalized is an 8-pillar support program for the startups who have won, who are the NSA finalists. And one of these pillars is mentorship program for them. There can be nothing better than this platform for the NSA winners and finalists to avail of this opportunity. And you know, let me share, when we try to figure out what is the wish list of those who are the finalists, 22 startups, they said they want to expand to Sweden markets. They want to go to Sweden for not just market access, but they have named Swedish mentors and Swedish companies for future collaborations. We cannot have had this kind of a program being launched today at a more opportune moment. I am extremely happy for Embassy of Sweden to come up with this kind of program. We will do everything that it takes to support these 192 companies, expand their markets in Sweden, and we would like to support them in whichever way that the government can support. I do really hope that this program will be very, very meaningful for these startups, and I wish everyone the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for setting the context for this launch and highlighting the features of our NSA program. I now invite Ms. Anita Shukla, Chargé d'Affaires, Embassy of India in Sweden, for the keynote address. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much, Jasleen. Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to address today's Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect launch. Mentor Connect, as the name suggests, is a series of thematic sessions which will be rolled out over the next few months. The startups will be mentored by the experts from India and Sweden. The goal being to encourage cross-border knowledge, exchange, and prepare Indian entrepreneurs for expansion to global markets such as Sweden. My heartfelt thanks to Mr. Anil Agarwal, Joint Secretary DPIIT, and Mr. Deepak Bagla, MD and CEO of Invest India, for their valuable insights, taking out their valuable time to grace this occasion, and also the enthusiasm that Startup India initiative is gaining in India. Because of these DPIIT and Invest India's very forward-looking initiative, I am sure the startups feel very welcome to join this initiative. My compliments to Invest India and Startup India team for putting together this very meaningful engagement. Needless to mention that Embassy has always been fully supportive of such initiatives. Friends, Sweden provides one of the most innovative ecosystems in the world, and it is an ideal launchpad for Indian startups wishing to expand in global markets. Simultaneously, Indian startup ecosystem welcomes global startups to pilot and test their innovative ideas in India. India's market size of 1.35 billion plus is huge. Thus, if you have the right product or technology, India holds a promise for mutual growth. India and Sweden enjoy a very robust and cordial bilateral, cultural, economic and trade relationship. As Mr. Bagla and Mr. Anil Agarwal mentioned, there are already 200 plus Swedish companies in India. Signing of joint declaration on innovation partnership for sustainable future and adoption of the joint action plan during the landmark visit of Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, to Sweden in April 2018 imparted vision to overall India-Sweden relationship. One of the priority areas in this vision document was the startup ecosystem. How is a startup ecosystem in India? India ranked number 3 in global startup ecosystem as per the 2019 economic survey. India ranked 4th in terms of number of unicorns as per the Purun Research Report 2020 with 21 unicorns valued at $73.2 billion. India is the 5th most startup-friendly country worldwide. The Government of India is simplifying rules to further improve the startup ecosystems. Mr. Anil Agarwal said very encouraging words today that all the startups taking part today would be given encouragement as far as possible from the government side. As per the NASSCOM report, the expected cumulative valuation for India's startup ecosystem will reach around $350 billion to $390 billion by 2025. If I say about the recent startup exchanges between India and Sweden, I begin from October 2017 when Invest India and Founders Alliance signed an MOU to mark the beginning of the Sweden-India Startup Sambandh. This engagement among stakeholders in both the countries in the ecosystems provided favorable business environment and necessary guidance to startups from both the countries for sustainable growth of their businesses in India and Sweden. Then in 2018, the Sweden-India Tech Community Initiative, or SciTech, came about. This was to promote common initiatives within the startup cross-border communities, engaging with universities, large companies, and government agencies. Thereafter, in September 2019, Sweden-India Business Council, together with Invest India, Air India, and Swedavia, organized a India-Sweden startup flight enabled by the city of Stockholm. This was a special flight which came from India to Sweden. This was one of the biggest, most dynamic and diverse gathering of tech startups. Indian delegation comprised of 30 creative startups and influencers having interest in establishing in Europe in next 2 years. Another platform, India-Sweden Business Leaders Roundtable, SBLUR, also has a common goal in joint working groups to work with startups and innovation, be it digitization, defense, skilling, or smart sustainable cities. There is a whole lot of platforms available for startups from India to expand in Sweden. In the year 2020, the global community is faced with an unprecedented challenge in the form of COVID-19 pandemic. While the pandemic has caused major loss of life, it has also placed undue stress on healthcare system and global economies. At the same time, the pandemic has taught us how to withstand difficult times and find novel ways through technologies. India has made great strides on digitization for the benefit of our citizens in every possible manner. Prominent among these are Jan Dhan Yojana, digital payments, e-Sanjeevani, and the list goes on. Startups can play a big role in making India Atmanirbhar. Another promising area for young entrepreneurs and startups is in the healthcare sector, as Mr. Bagla also mentioned. An India-Sweden Healthcare Innovation Center has been set up by AIIMS Jodhpur and AIIMS Delhi. Business Sweden and this innovation center has primarily been set up to identify potential frugal innovation ideas in the healthcare field. Then to incubate these ideas and develop them into effective and economic innovative solutions and making them available to the masses. If yours is a startup in healthcare with frugal innovation, you could present it to the India-Sweden Healthcare Innovation Center also. Sweden is number 2 in global innovation index. Stockholm is home to some of Europe's fast-growing startups, and second only to Silicon Valley when it comes to unicorns produced per capita. As Mr. Bagla mentioned, the key sectors of interest are expanding for investments into India from Sweden. The areas for startups to find a suitable foothold are accordingly expanding. India and Sweden have synergies and complementarities and can build on each other's strengths to deepen cooperation and to collaborate through startup communities. This keen interest from both countries for intervention in mechanisms for climate accountability and unlocking potential ensures that the future of Sweden-India relation is definitely on the upswing and poised to keep growing. Year 2019 witnessed the state visit by their majesties, the King and Queen of Sweden to India in December 2019, accompanied by a 100-member business delegation. This year, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the two prime ministers had a telephone conversation in April 2020, followed by several ministerial level interactions. There is a lot of bilateral conversations happening, and accordingly, the space for startups to come and expand in Sweden is also expanded. Last but not the least, my compliments and thanks to the eminent industry panel, which includes Mr. Kamal Bali, President and Managing Director of Volvo Group India, Mr. Pankaj Chagra, Executive Vice President and Head of Nordics of HCL Technologies, Mr. Mahesh Kumar, CEO of Result AB, Mr. Kari Krishnamurthy, Chief Commercial Officer of Truecaller, and Mr. Magnus Anderson, Country Business Development Manager of IKEA India, for taking out their valuable time for this mentorship launch. Your advice and guidance is highly valued. With these words, my compliments once again to all the stakeholders for organizing this event. My best wishes to all the startups from India and Sweden who have joined us for this launch. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that inspiring address, focusing on the way this engagement can help startups and deepen the relationship that both countries share. The focus of the Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect program is to prepare Indian startups for market expansion and provide in-depth understanding of the strategies to be adopted. These sessions will be centered around strategic planning, setting up development and progress priorities, adopting right marketing strategy, identifying target customers, planning go-to-market strategies, structuring organizational process, building the team, and more. I would now request all the dignitaries to launch the Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect. Thank you so much for being a part of this launch, and this program will hopefully deepen the ties the two countries share through startups and ecosystem stakeholders. Moving to the next part of our webinar, as a part of a knowledge sharing exercise, we are incredibly happy to host a panel discussion today on exploring cross-border innovation through startup ecosystem. Today, our panel of thought leaders and industry experts from India and Sweden will be sharing their expansion journeys in the corresponding market and the challenges they faced. We are extremely proud to welcome to the panel Mr. Kari Krishnamurthy, who, as the Chief Commercial Officer for Truecaller, handles the brand marketing and business development functions of Truecaller globally. A business management graduate, he has handled marketing roles in three big telecom companies in India: Airtel, Hutchison Asar, and Aircel, prior to joining Truecaller in 2013. Mr. Pankaj Tagra, Executive Vice President and Business Head for Nordic, Germany, and Switzerland region at Excel Technologies. Engineering and management graduate with over 23 years of experience in IT infrastructure, application, and telecom industry. Mr. Kamal Bali, President and Managing Director for Volvo Group in India, and IIT alumnus. He started his professional journey with Iger Group in 1981. He was knighted and awarded one of Sweden's highest honors in the Royal Order of the Polar Star Commander by their Majesties, the King and Queen of Sweden, for his untiring support to the Swedish commerce and industry in India. Mr. Magnus Anderson, Country Business Development Manager for IKEA India. Prior to joining IKEA, he was the Deputy Trade Commissioner of Sweden in India, heading the Swedish Government Trade and Invest Council office in South India. He also has over 16 years of strategy and management consulting experience with Mr. Mahesh Kumar, CEO of Result, having moved to Singapore to study at National University of Singapore. He has previously helped roll out Maggie TV internationally in new markets and was part of the rollout team of Blocket in Asia and Europe. Welcome everyone to the panel. We would also like to welcome Mr. Dhami, Second Secretary Commercial for Embassy of India in Sweden, who will be with us during the panel discussion. Well, it is quite rare to see industry leaders from leading corporate and unicorn startups to come together and discuss their growth story. The different pathways that your organizations have taken to grow and expand, negotiate in a new market, and adapt to it will definitely be helpful to our audience today. One of the key concerns for any startup when they plan to take their operations to a new market is the knowledge repository available about the market. The Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect aims to build this knowledge repository for startups to ease their access to both the markets while providing these startups with a network of peer organizations that they can share the knowledge with. I think today's discussion will be one such opportunity for us not just to discuss the logistical approaches to a new market, but the kind of foundational sensibilities that startups needs to develop for the same. With that, let me start with the discussion around the increasing of ease of access and its impact. So my first question is to all the panelists. A lot of Indian startups in the past few years have expanded to global markets and developed into global brands. Similarly, multiple startups from outside India are exceedingly setting up shop in India. How do you think globalization affects the startup ecosystem at large? Mr. Krishnamurthy, would you like to start?
Oh, yeah, I'm the first to be thrown in. Absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would say that today's problems are more global in nature, and so are the opportunities. I can talk from our perspective. Back in 2010, when the company was formed, we were trying to solve a global problem, right? Simple as it is, identifying callers or unknown callers and blocking the spam calls. And I think that has resonated globally without any blemishness anywhere across the world, including Sweden and EU. So I would say that as long most of the problems today we find are getting more global and global. There is no more the situation of having a very micro issues. So I think from our, let me put certain things from our perspective. How have we solved certain problems and how have we optimized certain opportunities, if I may. Today, India is our home market. While we were born in Sweden, or rather founded in Sweden, India is our home market simply because it's just not because of the problem that you're solving. It's also because the opportunities that we are gaining and we are looking into. Today, we have more than 185 million monthly active users, if I'm correct, and in India alone. And on average, we identify around 60 billion calls on a monthly basis, and out of which 15 billion calls are also blocked on a monthly basis. Actually, so all the spam and scams. So virtually, India becomes our home market, and all our efforts in terms of developing our product, research and development, resources, honestly, because as a company founded in India, I'm proud to say that we have, I think, close to around 150 employees in India, which actually outsize our own setup in Sweden, and we are constantly growing. But having said that, I would say that today, with this opening of social media, with the opening of digital platforms, the opportunities and problems are very global in nature, and as long as you are able to solve them, you are in the right place.
Absolutely. Mr. Sagar, we would like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, thanks. I completely agree. For HCL Technologies, we started in 1976 as 4 engineers started from a garage setup, and then we call our employees as ideapreneurs. So I completely understand the challenges which small enterprises face. Our entire business is based on global models, right? And I've been here in Sweden since 2008, beginning of 2008. Entire globalization, and thanks to ubiquity of internet, world travel, social media, I agree with Kari that the problems are global, but then the solutions are also global, and it provides immense opportunities, especially for startups. Right, Sweden is doing very well in economy in last 10 years. I think they have navigated through 2008 crisis, or even I believe current crisis in COVID. I think they are handling it differently, but they are managing it quite well. The industry here is growing, right? Of course, they have business problems, and what startups from India can provide is a skill, a transformation, a technology competence, good ideas, and the transparency. So that is something I do believe it brings us on a common platform. The world is flat, and the globalization is only giving an opportunities to go and solve those problems.
Absolutely. Mr. Anderson?
No, I think we started off a little bit like from a global perspective, and if we now double click on the 2 countries, India and Sweden, I think there are many good things said already. But what I think could be very interesting for many Indian startups in Sweden is that we have a tradition of being first movers to come up with and adopt a new idea. And after being 5 years in India, I can see similarities to the consumer in India, that they're also very open for new ideas. So I think that there is a little bit a match in heaven between India and Sweden.
Sure. Mr. Kumar, we have been talking a lot about how this pandemic has actually impacted the startups. I would say COVID-19 has radically transformed lives. The impact of this pandemic on global supply chain is witnessing unprecedented disruption of the time, which the world has never seen before. How can a founder redefine its expansion strategy and plans post COVID-19?
Yeah, no, so sorry for the technology issues with my computer. So happy to be here with all of you. I'm sorry I missed a little bit of the intro. No, so it's a great question. I think what I truly believe in, if I look at my own career, if I look at some of the best companies being built the last 15 years, they always start when the market is down. There's a very big correlation between a bad market and a bunch of innovations that spring up to life. So I think this pandemic would be no different. If we move forward 5-10 years from now, you'll see a bunch of new companies that have grown really fast that have been built out of this pandemic. There are three different things I think a startup or a founder can think about. If I look at an early stage company, I think what you see is behaviors changing rapidly. And a mistake I see when I meet founders here, when we run Epicenter, which is one of the largest innovation houses in Europe today, is a lot of startups think very short term. A lot of founders think very short term, and I think when there's so much uncertainty, the only bet you have is long term thinking. So you really need to, and that's hard because you don't know how the cookie is going to crumble. So that's one. The second thing is funding is obviously harder when you're trying to take more risk in uncertain times. So it's a lot about how you use your cash and how you use the resources you have. And finally, it's about people, and and that's common whether it's a pandemic or not a pandemic. How you take care of people working remotely, and there's a lot of psychosocial issues working remotely that a lot of companies seem to have a challenge with. If you look at data in Sweden, there's more and more visits to online consultations for psychologists and doctors and what have you, because people are sort of lacking inspiration to do their life's best work. So that's sort of general advice on what I see. But if I look at expansion, which is more related to your question, I think I'm not sure if now is the right time for expansion. I think now is the right time for testing. Now is the right time to understand. Now is the right time to if you're looking at Europe, is looking at what kind of customer behavior is interesting for your product. And there's a big difference between enterprise customers or enterprise startups and consumer startups, I'd say. So enterprise startups are very hard to break through today, in my experience, sitting on a few companies that are trying to do that, because decision makers don't want to make big decisions, especially if you don't have a relationship from the past. But on the other hand, consumer startups, I think it becomes very interesting to see as people have more time, working from home, and they have a little bit, they're constantly on the screen, what new sort of consumer behaviors can come up because of that. And you already see some examples of, of companies capitalizing on that. So in terms of expansion, my sort of prudent advice would be to be on gear 1 or 2, maybe 3, if you have a lot of funding, but to sort of understand and analyze. And if it's enterprise, is to build relationships instead of trying to sell. And if I come back to your first question, just my thoughts on, being on Sweden and being Indian, but living in Sweden and building companies, is that I think Sweden is a great test market, as Magnus said, but it's a very small market. It's 9 million people. I mean, it's on a big scale, it's not that interesting. But if you look at the infrastructure that is there in Sweden when it comes to bank ID, identification, data, it's one of the most open data countries in the world. So you can get all kinds of data today. So for you to test things in Sweden with sort of a Western consumer, I think Sweden is one of the top 3 markets to test your idea. But again, you need to have a lot of help to get to do that. People speak English and what have you. So there's a lot of advantages going that way. But if I'm an Indian startup looking to go global, Sweden might be a distraction. But if I'm an Indian startup that wants to really test interesting new technologies, Sweden might be perfect.
Absolutely. Mr. Bali, my next question is for you. We understand that for any startup, company values play a major role. Core company values shape your company culture and impact your business strategy. They not only help you create a purpose, improve team cohesion, and create a sense of commitment in the workplace. How should establish and align the value of their culture with the core operations and expansion plans?
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
I have a little problem with my audio, but I hope I'll be able to manage. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you for having us. Jasleen, coming to your question, I think culture and values are the bedrock of any organization. It is the foundation on which an institution is built over time. And it is a glue, to my mind, it's like a glue which binds the various elements of an organization. An organization has many functions, departments, various elements. If there is not a common culture, that the organization will be like a thread, in which everybody will work in silos. People will be working in silos, and that's a short recipe for disaster. So culture and values, to my mind, is the starting point of any organization. And in fact, if you look at an organization dynamic, organizations have two steering systems. One is culture, the other is structure. And very often, if something goes wrong, typically in the past, we would look at the structure, we will tweak the structure and think that organizations will get fixed in a good way. But that doesn't happen. So it's culture which actually takes long to build. And once the culture is well set, I think you can actually build an organization the way you want. Culture also, very importantly, drives the purpose and the vision or mission of the organization. I think so. So that's my second point. And I think if you look at our own organization, which has a history of almost 100 years, Volvo Group, and also about 22 years in India, I think we have built the organization on the paradigms of a culture of certain purpose. And that purpose is very, very clear. We want to stay relevant. We want to bring new paradigms to the customer. For the customer, we want to improve the situation of mobility. We want to take on some challenges of emissions, city congestions. I think all these have to be built in, all with a common purpose. So I think that's very important. And to do this, an era of collaboration is very, very important. And that is where startups come into play in a big way. An era of transparency leading to trust, trust leading to collaboration. And because startups can be much more agile, so it's a great complementary way of working. So I think, to my mind, culture and values are at the bedrock of the organization. And I would really recommend and urge all startups to take this as one of the fundamental starting points of an organization and stick to it.
Thank you, Mr. Bali. I believe all the startups have a lot to learn from the organization and with the kind of experience the organization carries right now. Coming back to Mr. Krishnamurthy, so I was reading this interview by Mr. Sandeep Patil, MD Truecaller, and he mentioned that India is one of our strongest markets. 75% of our overall user base is in the country, and roughly 80% of our users here use the app every day. About 60% of our user base comes from tier 2 towns, which is tremendous, I would say. So how has Truecaller adapted its product to the Indian market? And as per you, what are some environmental and business factors that Truecaller found conducive for expanding their operations in India?
Yeah, those are very interesting stats, but let me try to make it much more simpler. I think we rode, and I'm sure many of the OTT players and developers all over the world, everybody were lucky to ride on the growth of 2G, 3G, and now 4G, and also the proliferation of smartphone in India. Because long time back, I remember when we were launching 3G in India, pretty much stint at Aircel, we were talking about mobile screens having the potential to become the next big screen in front of you. And it's very amazing to see today that the biggest competitor for any television market or TV hardware today is mobile phones, because that has become a screen for everybody at home, right? Because we have there are single TV household, and now we have 4 or 5 members at a home who are consuming most of their content on mobile phones. I think I would say that I would not lie to you by saying that we did this and we did that. I think we have been lucky to be in a market like India, to be growing in a market like India, which has a great appetite for such consumptions. And of course, my colleague Sandeep had pointed out that more than 80% of the people use it every day. It's because of the perennial problem that we face. It's a challenge for us, right? Because there are people who try to abuse others, or even genuine people trying to reach out for genuine reasons. So it's very important for us to see where we fit in. And there are factors. You asked about business factors or environmental factors. For us, both are same, because at the end of the day, it's consumers, either the consumers on the street or at home, or people in the corridors of government. We treat everybody as an equal. And I think we have been lucky to adapt ourselves. I could quote, because the appetite, when I have spoken in few forums, whenever I meet the journalist, I always say that when they ask me the question that why is India a big market for you, my only answer is that it's in India's willingness to experiment and embrace innovation I remember, Mr. Magnus, I think around 7 years back, I got a call from your company asking for a reference about an advertising agency for IKEA in India. And when I was talking to some of my colleagues about the call, they were saying that, who would buy IKEA in India because you have to assemble all your products yourself. But India has embraced IKEA, and I know the entire launch, how it went through. Queues and all the innovations that you guys have been doing, and it's brilliant to see that, honestly. I would actually commend each and every member of the panel over here. Like when I look at HCL being part of the biggest franchise like Manchester United, it's actually bringing certain games closer to the home market. Like India is a big market, and I would encourage that every startup, even in Sweden, if they want to do something, if they want to experiment something, Mahesh said that it's a great time for experimentation and testing it out. India is the market because it is open, it is willing, and so are the government. Every government, state and central government, who are willing to welcome us with open arms. I can say that when we launched Truecaller Pay, I think it went like a breeze. Now when we have launched fintech product like loans and credit, you should see the excitement and exuberance from the banking sector, right? Something that we could not think around 20-25 years back, that these things could happen. So as long as we have been trying to maintain our relevance, trying to solve the day-to-day problems, listening to the consumers, picking up the smallest of the signals, and trying to address it. I'll just give you a simple example as I wind off here. We launched a new feature called Call Reason, and it came through because people were asking us, "Hey, Truecaller, you have been telling us who is calling us. No, can you tell us why they are calling us?" I think that's the sort of questions that we get from our consumers today. And that's when we say that, okay, we will launch Call Reason, because just before you make a call, you can say that, hey, I'm calling to verify your credit card, or I'm calling to or maybe from Kamal's company, brand like Volvo can say that, hey, this is about your test drive. Of course, I'll pick up the call immediately. So these are the small things that India has offered us. And I'm sure Mr. Kamal, Magnus, Pankaj, Mahesh, everybody would accept this fact that the willingness to experiment and embrace innovation, and actually going out of the way to not talk back to the brands, you will not find in any other part of the world, honestly.
Thank you, absolutely. And compliment to the numbers, I would like to tell that how we are growing as a country in the tier 2, tier 3. When we talk about stats, 45% of the Indian startups are located in the tier 2, tier 3 region. And we can proudly say that each and every district in the country has one startup which is being recognized by DPIIT. So moving on to Mr. Taga, a growing brand is always on the lookout for opportunities to expand its reach into new markets. And in order to maximize the efficiency of such growth efforts, any prospect market must be thoroughly reviewed and qualified prior to any resource allocation. What are the key metrics which organizations should take into account for expanding to a new market?
Yeah, thanks, Jasleen. Some of the key matrices which any startup organization can look into are quite obvious. When you are going to a new market, you need to go and assess and understand the new market potential. What is the volume of the market and what is the problem which you are going to solve. Then making sure that you are tailoring your product and service to that market. For example, if some startup is looking at approaching Sweden as a target market to set up, I think in these times today, sustainability and how that product and service is going to impact environment is going to be the topmost metrics to see, that how your product and service is going to add to the sustainability, or how it is environment friendly, or how is it going to be climate neutral. That is one of the metrics. So you have to go and find out what clicks in that market. If I go and specifically look into a startup coming from India to a Swedish market, I think when we started here, we also started as a startup. I can tell you that when I opened a room, it was a room of this size where I am sitting here, 10 by 10, right? And then from there we started, and today locally in Sweden, we are more than 1,725,000, consultants globally, helping Swedish companies. So what made it click, right? The first meeting which I got it in this market was 3 months away. Before that, I was working in India. We used to get a meeting next Friday, next Tuesday, and here I have it in my calendar. And my first meeting 3 months away. I think understanding how the market works and how your product and service, can be tailored to that market is the first and foremost. Once you have identified and you have generated an interest, I think in Swedish market especially, it is extremely important to make your customers successful. Right, your success lies in your customer's success. If your customer is successful in what you are providing and it is delighted, your next customer will follow. That's how the Swedish market works. Referenceability works extremely important, right? So although these are very, very mundane things, which I think this would have been discussed many times in a lot of management books, but I have actually seen it happening. Basic ground rules, making sure that you make your customers successful. Look at what is the size of the market, what investments you are making, and making sure that you have a strong referral that you can get your next one.
Absolutely. I think these are some very great inputs. Did we lose Mr. Anderson? Okay, maybe there is a... Okay, no problem. So I'll probably come back to him. Mr. Kumar, my next question is from you. What were the strategies used by Result and Epicenter to expand its footprint in Europe? And I would definitely like to back up why I'm asking this question, because we receive a lot of questions, a lot of requests from the startups. Maximum startups are looking to expand their operations in Europe, and this answer is going to be very useful for them. Mr. Kumar, you are on mute.
Hi, do you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, wonderful. I think you can divide Europe into beer countries, wine countries, and vodka countries, and then you can sort of follow it from there. And they all come with their own cultural nuances. Epicenter, we are in different countries across Europe. We are in, of course, we started here in Stockholm, but we're also in the rest of the Nordics. We are in Paris, we are in Germany, we are in a bunch of other cities. And it is so for Indians, it is not a surprise. Europe is like India, but different countries. Punjab is very different from Tamil Nadu, but there's something common about it, and we share the same flag and a lot of other things, but there's a lot of similarity to think that way. So think of Europe not as one strategy, but you need to think it through a little bit more. So a lot of American companies that come to Europe make that mistake, thinking that whatever works in Germany would work in France or Sweden, and it typically doesn't. So if I look at strategies in general, I agree with the basics that Mr. Pankaj was talking about. I'd also add one more thing, which is that if you're a tech company today, which is, I assume, most of our audience today, if you're a tech startup today, the possibilities of testing is enormous. I mean, you can test things really, really fast. So I'll give you an example. So when we launched Epicenter in Amsterdam, we put up a very simple homepage, epicenteramsterdam.com. We did a local event with a couple of partners in the ground. We got a bunch of people that could be interested. We didn't sell anything. We just asked them a bunch of questions and understood what is missing in the ecosystem to have our innovation house. So just to give you a little bit of background, Epicenter works with large organizations with their innovation teams from top down, and everything from sort of, future spaced out innovation to efficiency improvements. And we work with scale up. So companies that are 50, 60 plus employees, $3-4 million in turnover and growing really fast. And then we provide space and consulting and services and everything in one building, really. So we wanted to understand what's the state of maturity in, for example, Amsterdam. So we brought together a bunch of people that represent large organizations, the scale-ups, community builders, and just asked them a lot of questions to see what is missing, and then you cook the soup from there. And once we put up this homepage, we just drove a lot of traffic, got a lot of interest, and realized, okay, how should our product be? How should our value proposition? How should we shape it? So 3 months later, we already had all our customers signed up, but we didn't have a building. We didn't have our space yet. So once we knew who our customers were, we went and found the perfect space for them, for example. So there's a lot of avenues to test, I would say. That's more if you're an early stage company. Now, let's assume you're in 4 or 5 countries already, and you're going to country number 6, country number 7, country number 10. Obviously, you have a team, you have an expansion team or a growth team. You already know your data, you know your playbook. Then it's a very different story. Then it's a lot about know who. Who do you know that can accelerate the market for you? So I would say that if you have an X and a Y axis, on one axis is sort of testing, understanding your customers, getting the basics done, building it organically, or if you have a lot of funding, understanding how you're going to use the money. And on the other axis is a lot about relationships. And Europe has a lot of wealth that is concentrated in sort of the old family sector. So if you look at Germany, the Mittelstand, or the sector where you have small industries, they're extremely wealthy and they're extremely slow moving, simply because they don't have to change, and it's the same in France, it's the same in Sweden, it's the same in Spain. Sweden is much better than a lot of other European countries in its speed of adoption, but it's the same. So building relationships, I think, is one of the biggest advices I can give. Now, the question is, how do you build relationships, right? How do you get to the right people? And it's really a combination of being on the market, having the right team who understands your culture, your product, has the right experience, obviously, but understands the local market as well, speaks the local language, knows the right people, to actually moving some of your best people from India to here, simply because it takes time. So I would say invest in the relationship, invest in the basics, and divide European countries into beer, wine, and vodka, and understand the cultural nuances, because they're very different culturally.
I think that's some great advice, and probably you'll be getting a lot of LinkedIn connects from the startups now. Okay, so coming back to Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, I remember when the IKEA store was inaugurated in Hyderabad, there was a huge crowd which wanted to visit the IKEA store, maybe the curiosity and this new concept which Indians were not aware of. Indian towns and cities are not short of small family-run shops whose owners will visit your home, build furniture from scratch based entirely on your specific furnishing needs. Pricing Indians away from that furniture maker that they trust must have been a huge challenge for IKEA. What were the different challenges that you faced in expansion plan to India, and how did IKEA overcome the same?
Thank you so much. To start with, which is very important here, is that IKEA, on the retail side, we have, as you know, the Hyderabad store was 2018. Very soon we're going to open up Mumbai and then Bangalore. But I mean, our vision is to create a better life, everyday life for the many people, and that is not only for the customers; it's also for the co-workers and all our partners. So if we look back in time, we have actually been in India for more than 35 years. We have 50 suppliers here already, and I think we're engaging approximately 40,000 people directly and 400,000 indirectly. So in one way or another, we were familiar with India, but also, if I connect back to what Kamal Bali and Kari said about culture and values, I think that has helped us a lot in this expansion, and it has take some time, but I think the culture and values have really guided us through our journey of expansion. And also, just to reiterate what some of the panelists said, sustainability, equality, diversity is very core to us. So we're coming from a sourcing to a retail situation, and as you said, the organized retail is fairly small in India, but we believe that it will be a quite big portion eventually. But what we also seen is that it's almost like a leapfrog from organized physical stores to digital online. And that has helped us a lot also in the COVID crisis, where we came up with new way of selling and pushing more online than we had before. So if we look at a little bit into the future, online definitely is going to be the way forward together with our brand stores, the big blue stores that we have in Hyderabad. And we now also looking into smaller formats of stores, what we call excess stores, and coming closer to the customer. So it has been a journey from sourcing to retail, the blue boxes, to online and different formats. But definitely, back also to your question, affordability is key for us. And of course, in order to be affordable, we are also looking into producing even more in India. But there is one thing that I think the government could look into a little bit. It's not that easy to actually produce manufacturing in India, due to, again, back to our culture and values, where we have the sustainability. And just one thing, FSC certified wood makes it difficult for us to actually produce some of the ranges that we would like to produce in India. And there are very high duties on many of our categories, unfortunately. But in order to compete on a fair game, we will always try to be affordable, as affordable as possible. But definitely, India is a value-driven market. It's not easy, but I think we're coming quite far. We have approximately 6 million visitors to Hyderabad, and approximately 40 million people visit our website.
Definitely. I think IKEA is a very successful case study for any startup to learn from. There is this question I would like to actually open the floor and ask anybody who would be interested in offering. Given that Sweden is considered the home of numerous unicorns, what is unique about the market, and what is the strategic advantage of Sweden as a market for upcoming innovative Indian startups? Any panelist who would like to?
I can just start a little bit. I did some research, actually. Sweden has 7 to 10 unicorns. India has actually, depending on how you count, 61. 20 plus in India, but 40 is by India and outside India. So even if per capita unicorns are quite impressive in Sweden, India is, as a total, bigger and number 3 in the world, which is quite interesting. But back to your question, I think, again, the values in Sweden about sustainability is crucial to understand, together with beer, wine, vodka culture. Thank you.
I think I'll take that as a cue for me then. No, I mean, I agree with.
Justin,
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I hear a lot of feedback, a lot of echo, but okay. No, so I just wanted to say that I mean, India.
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. Can you hear me? So I asked.
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
Given that Sweden is considered the home of numerous unicorns, what is unique about the market, and what is the strategic advantage of Sweden as a market for upcoming innovative Indian startups? I think, Mr. Kumar, you were speaking.
Yeah, no, so sure, yeah,
Thank you.
no, but I think I agree with Magnus that India is really catching up, but it shouldn't be a surprise because it's a large country. It's just a lot of numbers. It's more a surprise that a small country like Sweden has that many. I think that's what people are surprised by, and Swedes are always underestimated, in my opinion, and they always over deliver. But so there are a couple of things. One is, I think Sweden has a very interesting give back culture. I mean, if you look at internet and digital computers, it's been around since the 80s. People have had it at home since the 80s, and people have grown up. A generation has grown up with it. When Silicon Valley started its tech boom in the 90s, Sweden was in going on a parallel track. It was happening in India from the outsourcing wave, but it's really caught up a decade later in India, I would say. So it's not a surprise that India is, coming to where it is already today. That said, I think Sweden also has a wonderful give back culture. What I mean by that is that You have one role model, it was Stay Beck in the 80s and 90s that creates more role models, and the role models keep moving on and give back and help and invest back and mentor and work with startups and sort of build communities. And Sweden is wonderful with collaboration. It's one of the most collaborative countries in the world. It is wonderful when it comes to associations and how people take responsibility. It's really pushed down in terms of responsibility. So you have so many organizations like Almi in Sweden that is a government-run organization, but it's as classy, as well-run as a private organization. It's as fast as a private organization, even better than a lot of private organizations. And that's because people truly want more accessibility, whether it's capital, knowledge, or network. I think that's something to learn. My experience is that India still has a little bit of catch up to do when it comes to the collaboration, when it comes to a little bit of that structure. But it's definitely getting there. When it comes to Indian startups coming to Sweden, which is your second question, I think we touched upon it a little bit earlier in the panel. But I would say it's really about if you're a consumer-facing startup, for example. Having Sweden's infrastructure, having Sweden's data, and having Sweden as a test market is really interesting. If you're an enterprise customer and if you've come a long way, like you're well established, obviously, Nordics is very interesting as a region, not just Sweden. Northern Europe and Nordics are interesting. You have some of the large companies, that are HQ'd here and are global. So if it depends on, for me, it's really business school 101. If market size is there, if your customers are here and you have very limited competition, simply because people don't think about this region as often on a global. If you open up a map and look at the map, then obviously you can win. One of the companies I started we sold last year to an American company called ClassPass. It was a fitness company, and we were in 4 countries here in the Nordics, and we just started expanding into rest of Europe when they came and acquired us. And we kept asking them, why do you acquire us? We are such a small Nordic player here, making a few $1 million in turnover. And they said, yeah, we would never come to the Nordics without acquiring somebody. And that's simply because the cost of expanding themselves is on a big Excel, it comes quite towards the end. So if you're looking at, if trade sell is one of your options 3-4 years from now, having regions like the Nordics is really interesting. If you look at what iZettle did, they realized that there was a lot of competition in the US, there was a lot of competition in rest of Europe, in Germany and France because of a lot of clones. So they went South America, so they took a lot of markets in South America. And that was an interesting strategy because they didn't follow, from Sweden to Finland to Norway to, they didn't follow the usual trajectory. They broke that trajectory and went somewhere else. They went to Mexico. They went to the rest of Central America, because they realized there's no competition there. So I'd urge all the startups to look at the map, look at competition, look at market size, and understand how you can build relationships. Because if your trade sale is one of your options, it is a really interesting market to corner.
Thank you so much. As interesting this panel is, in the interest of time, I would just take my last question. Again, open for everyone. Considering that, we are launching this Indo-Sweden Mentorship series, what are some similarities between the 2 global startup destinations, India and Sweden? And how can mentorship play an important role in expanding to the new markets?
Maybe I can take the first shot at it. I think Kamal referred to it right in the beginning, that culture and value of an organization. I believe between 2 societies there are a lot of commonalities as well, while there are differences which are quite obvious. But I think there are certain common elements, and maybe Magnus, having lived in India, can also a little bit talk about that on his experiences. I do feel that in both societies there is an attempt to find a solution and do away with conflict and find out some kind of a middle path, some kind of a consensus in solving a problem. I think that is something which I do feel that we in India underestimate the skill which we have it around it, and it is very well appreciated in markets like Sweden, or the entire Northern Europe. That to my mind is of course technology and solving a business problem. All those things are there, but in order to strike a relationship, what Mahesh said, I think finding out a middle ground and trying to build a consensus that there is a win-win. I have in my situations, I've seen customers back asking me, are you able to make enough profit that you will be able to sustain? I don't think in any other market people would have asked me that kind of a question. So then there is an attempt to create a win-win, which to my mind is a great. Yeah, Kamal, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pankaj. I think I completely agree with you, and I would like to actually share with this audience already an ongoing success story between Sweden and India. I think we have created a cities platform called SITIS. It is Sweden India Transport Innovation and Safety Platform. It's a multi-stakeholder collaboration aiming to foster innovation and drive progress in road traffic safety in India. And this is actually a consequence of the bilateral cooperation agreement signed between the two prime ministers in April 2018. And early this year, I think my dear friend, Honorable Mr. Sunil Dhami ji is there. In February this year, it was launched in the presence of Mr. Nitin Gadkari. And so this is a unique partnership, and this brings together 15 stakeholders across academia, research, industry, authorities, and they include people like VTI, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, Indian Institute of Science, ARAI, Ericsson, Autoliv, Saab, Volvo, Altair, Manipal Hospitals. So it's a really built on triple helix model. And a lot of startups can play a huge role in this. And the vision is very clear. We want zero fatalities on the roads of India. And I think it's a very, very big initiative. And this is working very well. We have been at it for the last now about 1 year. The results are absolutely amazing. So I think this is an example of how India and Sweden can work together to solve global problems. And once this has been tested out in India, I think this model can be there for everyone to see across the world. So this is a live example, Jasleen, where we can partner with each other, and it's a 15-member platform where we are all working, everybody bringing in the right earnest their capabilities to the fore to solve some very, very compelling problems of the world. So I think that is something very interesting. The other piece which I wanted to quickly share, because my audio has not been very good today, my apologies, is the Campax Innovation Arena, which Volvo has started in Gothenburg and soon launching in Bangalore. This is a workplace for more than 400 people from different parts within the areas of automation and electromobility. On top of that, we have selected external partners who are working with us to co-create transport solutions with the Volvo Group. And here also startups are welcome, and academia, industry, suppliers, authorities, customers, we are all working together. And the focus lies on the future transport solutions where automation, electromobility, and connectivity are the key focus areas. And so I think that is another very interesting opportunity called Campax, already happening in Gothenburg for the last about 1.5 years. Starting in Bangalore. Hopefully, we should be launching it by January 2021. So I will stop here, and just for our startup friends in the audience to know that there are a number of opportunities coming, and thanks to Invest India for getting us all together to get this message through.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bali. Mr. Krishnamurthy, any parting thoughts from your side?
Yeah, as a very, very small company, You mentioned there are certain unicorns in India and some unicorns in Sweden. I think I don't know whether we fall into both the categories, but good to be in both the buckets. But I would say that it's not like I'm giving an advice, but I would just share our learnings. We have never been scared of losing and failing, and we have always wanted to experiment. And our only motto is that if you want to fail really fast, because then it's very easy to move on. And in my past, I have met with many enterprising startups. I would say that this word called MVP, I think it's called as a minimum viable product. A lot of people tend to dwell on it. I always find it as a compromise. You just have to go full hog. Don't try to give something and hope something else turns out. You need to go full hog.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Sagra, I think you want to add something.
Yeah, I thank you. I just want to take a cue from Kamal because a lot of startups both in Sweden and India would be there on the call, and I just want to share that at HCL we have established an enterprise technology office, and we have an ecosystem which we call it as the ESTIP, because one of the challenges which startups face is that probably they are solving a business problem, but they are not able to go to a large customer and they are not able to scale. So we provide an incubation, which is a 3-step process. We help them, right? So what we do is we when my customer reaches out to me, they have a business problem. We go and scout which startup or which entity can go and solve across the world, right? And we do it in India and Sweden as well. And then we evaluate and curate along with them, and then we construct a solution and present it to customer. We have HCL labs where we go and test it out along with them, and then we help those startups to scale it and take it to a global customers. As we stand today, we have more than 20 such customers where at least 10 plus startups have been used, and they have really scaled up, right? A lot of large companies are also, I don't want to name them, but a lot of large companies started with that process in last 4 years. So if and invest India is part of that, right? We are associated with you also, that so be part of that ecosystem and share what business problem you can solve, and we will help you to take it to a large customers, and then we can grow together.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing information.
I have one thing to share on a final word. If you're a women entrepreneur, I'd ask you to look at Sweden. Women entrepreneurship is really growing well. I know it's an issue in India and it's starting to come up. And again, there is tons more talent. We tend to forget 50% of our audience. So I just wanted to reach out to any women sitting in the audience that are thinking of starting a startup, that have a company. Sweden has a lot of amazing support that very few countries in the world, in my analysis, have. So if you're a woman entrepreneur, you should look at more in Sweden.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Now I would like to invite Mr. Dhami to share his thoughts with the panel. Mr. Dhami, you're on mute. So you're on mute. We can't hear you.
So, who are you addressing?
Mr. Dhami, from Embassy of India to Sweden. So you're still on mute. Should
Mr. Dhami, you're muted. You're mute. Your audio is muted.
I think he's asking us to wait or move ahead. And we can't unmute you, sir, from our side. Okay,
if there are a couple of minutes, I wanted to leave some takeaway.
Sure, sir. Maybe by the time we'll just wait for Mr. Dhami, you can go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think, out of experience with working with certain startups and certain other, I think 5-6 takeaways, 8-9 points I want to leave behind very, very quickly in the next 1 minute. I think An idea is very important. The starting idea is very, very important. Second is patent your idea, very important. The third is build a good team. Team is very, very crucial. Fourth, outsource mundane jobs. No point doing mundane jobs yourself. Number 5, know yourself, your purpose, your core values. Very, very critical. Number 6, analyze your competition. Very important. What is your value proposition? How does it differ from others? Number 7, zero ego. There should be no ego when you are building an organization. Let success belong to anyone. Ultimately, you have to solve the problem. Number 8, workforce diversity. Please ensure that you have workforce diversity. Number 9, 360-degree integrity. Build 360-degree integrity. Number 11, have an exceptional board. You don't go after celebrities all the time. Bring board members who will bring value to your organization. Cash is the king. Get right equity in the company. Don't be afraid of future. Don't be afraid of failure. This will also pass. Procrastinate, but not perpetually. And last 2 points, build brand. This is very important. Build brand, build loyalty, awareness, and quality about your product. And last but not least is appropriate pricing. I thought I will leave this point quickly while Mr. Dhami is on mute.
No, thank you so much, Kamal, for giving absolutely wonderful insights. Justine, I just would like to say thank you for moderating this wonderful webinar series. Thank you and your entire team. We have been working very closely with you and Shivangi, I would say, and all wonderful people. And we are looking forward to conducting the whole series of theoretic sessions, which will be rolled out in the coming months. I think the next one being planned for the 2nd of December. I would also like to thank Kamal Bali from Waldo, Kari Krishnamurthy from Truecaller, Mahesh from as we know him from the epicenter, more popularly, and of course Pankaj, wonderful person, and Magnus, the IKEA guy in India. So thank you all for giving your wonderful insights to the new startups that are coming up. Looking forward to Scandinavia and Europe and elsewhere in the world. So thank you so much for this. For the benefit of all these startups, I must inform that on 27th of November, we are hosting the Indo-Sweden Innovation Day, which Invest India is part of. All the stakeholders not here are also part of and would be participating. So there would be startup component in all these sessions, in all the sessions there. You're most welcome to please participate in that. You can follow the Embassy of India's Facebook to know what is happening on the startup and the innovation front. As far as Sweden is concerned, we are having absolutely very enhanced cooperation in the fields of innovation and in the startup ecosystem. SciTech is one of the very good examples, which is taking place to 15 different stakeholders. India and Sweden have also launched the global transition track to bring about net zero carbon emissions. So there are some very innovative things that are happening at the bilateral level. As you know, the northern India is having a lot of poor quality of air, and there's a lot of work that's going on with the Swedish stakeholders by creating by creating biofuels from the stubble which is being burned right now. I think there are some news that some furniture also is being constructed out of the stubble. So there's a lot that is happening as far as the innovation and startup ecosystem between the two countries is concerned. So with these words, I would like to compliment all of you, all the eminent panelists in West India, and would like to also convey best wishes on behalf of this embassy to all these startups that are participating from all over and all these stakeholders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dhami. I would also like to thank my master, Nikita Gupta, Shivani, and Gautam for organizing this. We hope that all our viewers enjoyed this conversation, and thank you to all our panelists for taking out time from their schedule to attend this discussion. Just as has been highlighted in the discussion, the scope for growth for startups in both the countries is immense. Startup India, through the Indo-Sweden Mentor Connect, wants to tap into this potential and provide opportunities. The mentorship sessions for both Indian startups looking to explore global markets will be recorded and made available on the Startup India website. The sessions are scheduled to run from the 2nd of December to the 4th week of February 2021, with 5 mentorship series of 120 minutes each. The mentors for these sessions will be industry experts and startups and corporate leaders. We hope that all the startups and stakeholders will be able to utilize this opportunity to understand the markets better. And through this program, we will be deepening our bilateral ties and cross-border commerce. Thank you to our audience members, our speakers, and our panelists for attending today's launch event. Thank you and take care.